No one even remembers who I used to be. That morning, while the mist still quietly clung to the dusty glass of the diner's window, an old man wearing a faded windbreaker stepped inside. The door chime jingled, but no one looked up. No one greeted him. No one smiled. He stood for a moment in the doorway, taking in the room that had once been his pride. His eyes paused on a crooked old photo hanging on the wall, a young man in a white apron, sweat beading on his forehead, holding a spatula over a blazing hot grill. That face once brimmed with hope. Back in the day, when no one even knew the name of this diner, it was him who peeled every onion by hand, flipped every steak, washed every plate in the middle of the night. Every thank you from a customer, every smile when they took their first bite, had been the fuel that kept him standing through those hard days. He had truly believed that if he worked with all his heart, things would get better. But now, this place had grown to 26 locations across 4 states, becoming a brand many people knew. People praised his name in shareholder meetings, in profit reports, but no one remembered why he started in the first place. He found a table in the corner, his hands trembling slightly as he set down his old hat, wiping a thin layer of dust off the table with a frayed handkerchief. No one came to ask what he wanted to order. Not a single glance, not a single greeting. From the corner of the diner, he heard the laughter of young employees at the counter, a mocking voice saying, "Does that old guy really think he has enough money to order a steak? He probably just came in here to steal some air conditioning." He said nothing, only quietly looking down at his hands, still bearing the calluses from years at the stove, warm and silent. When you spend your whole life building something, and then one day you come back and realize everyone has forgotten how much it used to matter, that is a quiet kind of pain. He looked up, his eyes deep, scanning the room, the walls that once echoed with laughter, the tables that once gathered families, now filled only with the dry clatter of cutlery on plates. The harsh fluorescent lights cast a pale glow on the indifferent faces of employees who looked at their phones more than they looked at the customers. In that moment, he realized indifference doesn't start with grand gestures. It starts with eyes that no longer meet, with apologies left unsaid, with smiles that disappear under the weight of busy work. And deep down, he knew he hadn't come here for a steak. He had come to find the soul of this place again. If they treat a stranger this poorly, what else are they hiding? He quietly asked himself as his eyes fell on the elderly waitress whose hands trembled slightly as she carried water to a nearby table, her eyes tired but still holding a gentle warmth, even though no one bothered to look at her. That day, he decided he would sit, observe, and listen, not as the founder, not as the owner, but as an anonymous old man, to truly see what this place had become. And no one in the diner knew that this quiet morning was the moment a change would begin. The old man sat in the corner, his hand resting lightly on the cold tabletop, feeling the small scratches illuminated by the yellow light. In front of him, his glass of water remained empty, and no one paused to ask if he was thirsty. A young couple walked in, their laughter soft, hands held, eyes bright as they searched for a seat by the window. Immediately, a young waitress hurried over, a bright smile on her face. "Welcome in. Please have a seat. Can I get you something to drink while you look over the menu? They were served water, given menus, and offered appetizers warmly, all within less than a minute. The old man watched it all, the loneliness in his aged eyes glinting softly. He cleared his throat, but the noise of the diner swallowed the sound. He raised his hand higher, waving gently, but the young server passed by without a glance. At the counter, 2 young employees were hunched over their phones, giggling now and then. One young man turned to his friend, his voice dripping with disdain. "Is that old guy still sitting there, probably just waiting for free water?" Quiet laughter slipped through, blending with the bland instrumental music playing. The old man heard it all, every word, every tone, like tiny needles piercing into his heart. He wasn't angry, just felt a quiet crack inside his chest, where the memories lived of the days he stood at the grill, bowing slightly to customers, receiving smiles as they took their first bite. When silence is the only answer you get, it becomes the cruelest rejection. Finally, after 17 minutes, an older waitress approached his table. She wore a faded apron, deep eyes with dark circles, her hands trembling slightly as she held her notepad. But when she looked at him, her eyes still held a strange warmth. "I'm sorry you had to wait so long, sir. What would you like to order?" Her voice was hoarse but gentle, not rushed, not avoiding his eyes like the others. He nodded. "A T-bone steak, medium rare." She carefully wrote it down, quietly repeating to herself to make sure. "T-bone steak, medium rare. All right, I'll take this to the kitchen right away." As she turned to leave, he saw the old bandage wrapped around her wrist, her hand trembling slightly as she turned the page on her order pad, walking slowly but steadily across the diner. The old man watched her thin back, remembering himself 30 years ago, standing in the kitchen, hands greasy, eyes stinging from the smoke, but his heart beating faster every time a customer was happy with their meal. When the elderly waitress reached the kitchen counter, a young employee snatched the order slip from her hand, speaking rudely. "I'll take it to the kitchen. You're too slow." She stayed silent, only nodding slightly, but her eyes flashed with hurt. She turned to go back to the tables, her shoulders shaking just a bit. The old man saw it all, every detail, every scornful look, every cruel laugh. She returned to his table, placing a cold glass of water down, bowing deeply. "I'm so sorry for the wait. Your food will be out soon. Thank you for your patience." For the first time, in the noisy bustle of a midday rush, someone looked him straight in the eyes, saw him as a human being. She wasn't just carrying water. She was carrying an apology for everyone who had ever been forgotten in this room. The old man nodded, his gaze softening, and whispered, "Thank you." In that brief moment, he saw himself 30 years ago, when he was young, when he wiped down every table by hand, flipped every piece of meat with all his heart, believing that each meal was a promise to keep the trust of every customer. A quiet laugh drifted over from the counter, followed by a cold remark. That old lady should just retire already. The old man heard it, and this time his hand clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. That's not just disrespect, that's ingratitude. And in that moment, he knew he could not sit still any longer. The steak was set down in front of him without a word, without a glance, without an apology for being late. The young server turned away before the plate had even touched the table. He looked down. The steak was burnt on the edges, dry, with no juices left, the edges blackened, the middle a dull grey, carrying a faint burnt smell. He tried cutting into it, but the knife didn't glide, it snagged, the meat as tough as rubber. He chewed a small bite, dry, bland, with none of the feeling of the dish that had once made the diner's name. The steak had once been an honor, once the heart of the kitchen, once his own pride. A dish isn't just a dish. It's the way people see each other. It's the way they remember each other. He looked up, scanning the room. Other customers sat eating. A young family arguing quietly because the food was cold. Another older man had left without eating, leaving nearly a full plate behind. No one apologized to them. No one asked if they needed anything. The clatter of spoons against plates sounded harsh in the cold air. In a place that once was filled with laughter, the smell of warm food and friendly greetings. The elderly waitress passed by his table, her hands trembling slightly, her eyes glancing at the steak that had been hacked apart. A brief sadness flashing in her gaze. She paused, whispering, "I'm sorry. They don't understand." Her voice cracked for a second, then she pressed her lips together, bowed her head, and hurried away to avoid the mocking eyes of the young employees clustered by the counter. In this place, silence has become a language, and indifference has become a habit. The old man sat still, watching her, seeing her back bending as she stooped to pick up a fallen napkin from the floor, her hands shaking as she carried dirty dishes piled high above her head, with no one helping, no one caring. Inside, giggles came from the kitchen counter. A young employee said, "Why's that old lady even still working here, slow and useless?" Laughter burst out, overpowering the soft music droning from the speakers on the wall. The old man set down his knife, took a deep breath, and slowly stood up. He walked slowly toward the restroom, but stopped at the kitchen door. Through the cracked door, he saw the head cook, a fat man lounging in a chair, feet propped up on a cardboard box, eyes closed, snoring softly. Next to him, the kitchen was cold, no sizzling oil, no warm scent of grilled meat, no familiar clatter of knives and cutting boards. On the table, a half-eaten sandwich sat surrounded by flies. This is the reason, not the system, not demanding customers, not changing times. It's the people who have stopped caring. Quietly. The old man closed the door and returned to his table. The elderly waitress was still bustling around, cleaning up spills while the young employees leaned against the counter, scrolling through their phones, chewing gum, laughing over TikTok videos. As she passed by, he called gently, "Ma'am." She stopped, turning back to him with tired but still warm eyes. "Yes." He looked straight into her eyes, his voice soft but firm. "You've done better than everyone else here." Her eyes shimmered, her lips trembling, but she only bowed her head. "Thank you, but I'm just trying to do my job." She turned away, continuing to clean, as if the words had never been spoken. But her steps were lighter, her back a little straighter. even if only for a moment. In a place where indifference is the norm, a kind person becomes a stranger, and he knew that it was people like her, the quiet ones, who were keeping this place alive, even if only with the faintest breath. He turned back to the table, looking at the cold steak, then into the empty space before him. Inside him, a promise began to form, a promise to bring the soul back to this place, no matter the cost. The afternoon dragged on, the noise of the diner becoming a heavy backdrop, no longer the sound of life, but the noise of exhaustion, of shuffling feet, of hollow laughter. The elderly waitress quietly set down each glass of water, wiped away the droplets on the tables, picked up each napkin that fell to the floor. No one asked her to, and no one thanked her. The young employees walked past her, not even noticing she was there. From his corner, the old man watched it all, his eyes patient but deep within. A small flame was smouldering. This place used to be where people looked at each other and smiled. Now, everyone looks at each other like shadows. A soft giggle echoed again from the drink counter. A young employee joked, "That old lady asked to swap shifts today. Heard she has a doctor's appointment." Another snorted. Doctor's appointment? Probably for her back. She should just retire already. She's slowing the whole place down. Laughter rang out, sharp as knives cutting through the thick air. The old man watched them, his hands resting on the table, clenching slightly, the knuckles whitening. The old woman stepped up to the counter, holding her order pad, her voice soft. I'm sorry. I know it's busy today, but would it be possible for me to switch out of the afternoon shift? I have a doctor's appointment. I've had it scheduled for 3 months. The manager, a heavy-set man with indifferent eyes, didn't look up from his tablet, his voice dry. "We're short-staffed. You know that. If you can't handle it, you can just quit." She stood still, gripping her order pad, her lips pressing together. Just for a moment, her shoulders slumped, her eyes fell. Then she nodded softly. "I understand." She turned away, walking slower, but still cleaning tables, still smiling as customers came in, though that smile had become tired. That's how indifference suffocates kindness. When one person keeps giving while others only know how to laugh. The old man watched her small frame, remembering the days he had slumped over the sink at 3A. His hands raw from washing hundreds of dishes, but still smiling when regulars returned the next day. He knew she wasn't asking off because she was lazy or to avoid work. She just wanted to keep her appointment, maybe to preserve her health so she could keep working, keep cleaning these tables when no one else wanted to. People like her, though they never say it, are the quiet souls keeping this place from collapsing. The door chime rang again. A young couple entered, their eyes lighting up with hope of being welcomed. But no one came to greet them. No one offered them a seat. They looked around, confused, before finding an empty table near the window, brushing off the crumbs themselves before sitting down in silence. The elderly waitress walked past, about to stop, but caught the manager glaring at her, so she bowed her head and kept cleaning another table. A minute passed, then 5, with no menus, no water. The couple sat there, their eyes beginning to cloud with disappointment, their hands clasping tighter as they whispered something he couldn't hear. The old man watched it all, each second, each minute, like watching his memories being trampled on, seeing the place he built with sweat, tears, and hope turn into a place of indifference, cold, lacking human warmth. There's nothing more painful than seeing the things you once loved being abandoned, and he knew he needed to stay longer, to observe more, to find out what had truly killed the soul of this place. In that moment, he whispered to himself, tomorrow, this place will not be the same as it is today. The old man left his table, slowly walking toward the checkout counter. But instead of paying, he stood silently, pretending to read the laminated, frayed-edged menu. Behind the counter, 2 young employees were folding straws, laughing, occasionally glancing at him and smirking. One muttered, loud enough for him to hear, "This old guy will be waiting for service until tomorrow." The other replied, voice mocking, "Whatever. That slow old lady will handle it like always." Quiet giggles rang out, pressing into the cold emptiness of the diner. The old man clenched his hand slightly, his gaze darkening. He wasn't angry, but something inside him had changed. Just then, the order bell rang from the kitchen. A plate of burnt, cold pancakes was set on the tray. The head cook was still slouched against the wall, feet on the box, eyes closed, snoring. A young employee stepped into the kitchen, calling out, "Hey, there's a new order." The head cook cracked an eye open, yawned long, lazily stood up, flipped the pancake with one hand without checking the heat or watching it, then set it back on the tray with a shrug. Good enough. Laughter rippled among the people around. Then they clustered back around their phone screens, scrolling through TikTok, chatting about meaningless clips. The old man stood there, looking through the crack in the kitchen door, his eyes slowly scanning each face. Each face was indifferent, tired, lacking any pride in the work they were doing. Back then, every time I placed a dish on a customer's table, I felt proud. Now, they drop it like they're tossing out trash. The elderly waitress stepped up to the tray, looking at the burnt pancake, shaking her head slightly, sadness in her eyes. She took a napkin, wiped the edge of the plate, adjusted the fork and knife carefully before carrying it out to the customer's table. Her voice soft. "Thank you for waiting. Here's your order." The customers glanced at the plate, disappointment flickering across their faces, but when they saw her smile, they just nodded, saying nothing. She bowed slightly in apology, then turned back to the counter, continuing to wipe down water spots no one asked her to clean. It's people like her who have kept the soul of this place alive, even if by the thinnest of threads. The old man left the counter, returning to his table. The steak was cold, shriveled, but he still sat down, picked up his knife and fork, cut a small piece, and chewed slowly. The meat was dry, flavorless, like dust on his tongue. His eyes looked straight toward the counter, where the old waitress was bent over, wiping down each chair, her hands trembling but still patient, still meticulous, still gentle. Behind her, the manager stepped out, arms crossed over his chest, his voice cold. "You're still here. I told you. If you can't handle it, quit." She froze for a second, took a deep breath, her voice small but clear. I can still work." The old man saw her eyes then, a look of determination mixed with a touch of sadness. She turned away, continuing her work. No complaints, no protests, just quietly moving forward. Resilience isn't the sound of shouting. It's the way someone keeps walking when everyone else has given up. In that moment, the old man understood that she didn't stay because of money or out of fear of losing her job, but for something deeper. Maybe it was belief, maybe it was pride, or maybe she just didn't want this diner to lose its last shred of hope. The old man set down his utensils, his eyes glinting with resolve, a voice echoing in his mind. Tomorrow, everything will change. Outside the window, the afternoon sun pierced through the dusty glass, lighting up his face, highlighting the deep lines carved by time. But in his eyes, one thing remained: the fierce resolve of a man who had built everything with his own hands. Tomorrow, I will come back, but not as some nameless old man. That afternoon, he left the diner in silence, each step pressing into the hot concrete of the sidewalk, while his heart felt cold. He stopped in front of the diner's glass. Looking inside, the old waitress was still wiping down the last tables, her hands shaking as she carefully smoothed out the folds in the napkins. The young couple had just left, their eyes filled with disappointment, without a single goodbye. The young employees still clustered together, laughing, none of them looking up as customers walked out. He looked at his reflection in the glass, an old man with silver hair, a worn-out jacket, tired eyes. But in those eyes, a flame still burned. "It's time for me to come back, not as an anonymous old man, but as the man who built this place with blood and sweat." That night, he sat alone in his small room, opening an old wooden chest. Inside were keepsakes, a photo of him standing by the stove, apron stained, sweat on his forehead, but a bright smile on his face. A steel ladle worn smooth on the handle, the same ladle he once used to serve hot soup to the homeless on cold winter nights. A handwritten thank you card from a customer. "Your food saved a terrible day for me." He gripped the photo tightly, closed his eyes, feeling the scars on his hands, scars from his youth, when he stayed up all night washing dishes, scrubbing floors, cleaning the kitchen. When all the employees had gone home and he sat alone counting every last penny, exhausted but never giving up. The soul of this place isn't in profit reports or in slogans pasted on the walls. The soul of this place is its people. The next morning, as the sun rose, he stepped out of his house wearing a neatly pressed grey suit, polished black leather shoes, a tidy tie. On his chest was a small name badge, engraved with his name as the founder of this restaurant chain. He paused in front of the mirror, looking into his own eyes, whispering, "Today, I will bring the soul back to this place." As he stepped into the diner, the door chime rang softly like always, but this time everything froze. The manager, who had been laughing with a few young employees, stopped mid-joke, the smile freezing on his face. A young employee scrolling through his phone looked up, mouth open, eyes wide. The old waitress, wiping down a table, turned her head, her eyes widening, her hands trembling. The entire space froze in that moment. He walked in slowly, his eyes sweeping over each person, his voice deep yet clear, not needing to be loud. "Thank you for yesterday." No one dared to reply. No one dared to breathe too loudly. He stepped up to the counter, turned to face them all. "Yesterday, I was here. I saw how you served customers, how you mocked them, how you treated your colleagues." The manager swallowed hard, his voice shaking. I didn't know." The old man raised his hand for silence, his voice steady, heavy as a hammer. "No excuses. We don't need excuses here." He turned to the old waitress, her eyes red, her hands shaking. He stepped toward her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "You are the reason I came back today." A single tear rolled down her cheek, dropping to the floor, shattering softly in a sound that everyone heard. He turned back to the staff, who all stood with their heads bowed. "Starting today, everything will change. No more mocking laughter behind customers' backs. No more cold, careless meals. No more indifference." He pointed at the manager, his voice firm. "You're fired. Immediately." The manager stuttered. I... The old man didn't look back. "Leave." The manager lowered his head, walking out in silence, the door closing behind him, the chime ringing like a final judgment. The diner fell into heavy silence. No one spoke. No one moved. The old man turned to the old waitress, offering a soft smile. "You kept this place alive. You will help me change it." She burst into tears, lowering her head. But this time, her tears were ones of relief. Today, the soul of this place has returned. After the manager left, the diner remained in heavy silence. The old man, now in his pressed suit, with the determined gaze of a founder, stood in the middle of the diner, looking at each person. No one dared to scroll on their phones anymore. No one laughed under their breath. No whispers buzzed in the air. The old waitress stood still, her thin hands clutching the cleaning cloth, her eyes red, her breath shaking with emotion. The old man looked at her and nodded softly. "You kept this place alive." She bit her lip, unable to speak, bowing deeply. He turned to the remaining employees, his voice resonant, deep and firm. "I didn't come back here to fire you all. I came back to restore this place to what it once was." He gestured around the diner. "These tables have witnessed hundreds of life stories. These dishes once brought hope to those who were tired. But you've all forgotten that." A young employee raised his hand, trembling. I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were." The old man shook his head, his voice softening. "It doesn't matter whether you know me or not. What matters is that starting today, you remember that customers are not just people who pay. They are human beings, with stories, with hope." He looked at each frightened eye. "Anyone who is willing to stay, stay. Anyone who feels they cannot change their attitude towards service, you can leave today." No one moved. He turned to the old waitress, pulling a brand new name tag from his pocket, shiny, engraved with Linda, floor supervisor. Her eyes widened, tears spilling again, her voice shaking. "Sir, you don't have to." He placed a hand on her shoulder, looking her straight in the eyes, saying, "I need to, because you are the one who kept the soul of this place alive when everyone else forgot." Around them, the young employees looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time, not with cold indifference, but with quiet respect. The old man took a deep breath, turning to the staff. "We will start again." He personally took the old apron hanging on the wall, the apron he once wore in the early days, and put it on. The rustle of the fabric echoed, decisive. He stepped into the kitchen, reigniting the grill, the flames flaring up, warm, pushing away the coldness that had blanketed the place for too long. This is the sound of life. He flipped each piece of meat, adjusted the heat, added seasoning, turned the meat with practiced hands, the aroma beginning to spread through the diner. The young employees watched, seeing for the first time someone cooking with bright eyes, steady hands, precise movements, like someone they had never met before. Customers began to walk in, one by one, their eyes surprised to see the founder standing in the kitchen, grilling, flipping burgers, placing lettuce leaves and cheese slices on each plate. Linda stepped out, holding her head high, offering a genuine smile as she greeted customers. "Welcome in. Please feel free to choose your seat." Her smile spread warmth through the room, making the old plastic chairs feel softer, making the fluorescent lights seem gentler, making the sounds of the diner lose their harshness. She's not just cleaning tables. She's wiping away the indifference that has clung to this place. The young employees began picking up rags to wipe down tables, straighten menus, pour water for customers, no longer laughing idly, no longer leaning against the counter, scrolling on their phones. They began learning how to watch customers, how to smile, how to listen. He placed the freshly grilled steak on a tray, walked out, and set it down in front of an elderly customer, offering a gentle smile. "Thank you for waiting." The customer looked at him, the old man's eyes meeting the eyes of the elderly customer, and they both nodded, saying nothing, needing only to understand. In that moment, this place was no longer a soulless diner. It had become a home again. That day, the small, worn-out diner came alive in a way it hadn't in years. Customers walked in, no longer stepping into heavy silence, but into a place where their eyes widened with surprise at the sight of the old man in a worn apron standing at the grill. Smoke rising, the aroma of grilled meat filling the space. Linda, now wearing her new floor supervisor name tag, stood tall, her gentle smile greeting customers with genuine respect as she invited them to choose a table. An elderly woman entered, her hair silver, clutching a worn cloth bag, her eyes sparkling when she saw the old man at the grill. Linda stepped forward, gently taking the woman's hand. "Please, have this table by the window. The sunlight is beautiful today." The elderly woman nodded softly, her voice trembling. "It's been so long since someone here smiled at me." A young father walked in with his daughter, the little girl peeking shyly at the old man behind the grill. her eyes bright. "Daddy, he looks like Grandpa." The old man smiled, waving to the girl. She giggled, waving back. The father whispered, "Let's sit here, sweetheart." The young employees began moving more, no longer leaning against counters or scrolling through their phones. They wiped down tables, straightened chairs, poured water for customers with cautious eyes that now met the customer's gaze as they said, "Thank you for coming in." Behind the grill, the old man flipped each piece of meat with care, added a sprinkle of pepper, drizzled a bit of sauce, every movement precise, not a single drop spilling on the plate. The sizzling of meat meeting flame, the warm aroma filling the diner, made customers waiting for their meals turn their heads, eyes lighting up in anticipation. This is the sound of life. A young employee who just yesterday had mocked Linda stepped up to the old man, his voice trembling. "Sir, could I learn how to grill steak from you?" The old man turned his head slightly, his eyes warm. "Of course, but first, you need to learn how to care for the customers." The young man lowered his head. "Yes, sir, I understand." In that moment, a strange silence filled the diner, not the silence of indifference, but the silence of realization, of change. Linda stepped up beside the old man, handing him a glass of water. "Please, take a break. Let me continue grilling." He shook his head, smiling. "Go out there and talk with the customers. Let them see the face of the person who kept the soul of this diner alive." Linda looked at him, her eyes glistening, but she nodded, turning away to walk over to the table where a single mother sat with her young child. Linda bent down, smiling, striking up a conversation with the child, making the boy laugh, the sound of his laughter filling the diner, chasing away the weariness. When a place can make a child laugh, it has become a home. Customers began taking photos, posting them online, captions appearing on their posts. Today I saw the owner himself grilling steaks. A small place, but incredibly warm. The elderly waitress with the gentle smile made my day less tiring. Likes, comments, and shares began to spread, and even customers who had once left because of the indifference began to return. An old man entered, leaning on a cane, his eyes scanning the diner until they stopped when he saw the old man behind the grill. The elderly customer laughed. "Ah, so you finally came back." The old man looked up, recognizing his old customer, raising his hand in greeting. "I'm back." The laughter of the two elderly men rippled through the diner, warming the room, spreading to other customers, making them smile too. A diner is not just a place that sells food. It is where people connect, where smiles are shared, and respect is preserved. That day, sunlight streamed through the fogged-up glass, shining on the clean tables, the steaming plates of food, the smiles, and the eyes filled with quiet joy. And in that moment, the old man knew he had brought the soul back to this place. In the days that followed, the small diner was no longer the same. The laughter of customers replaced the heavy silence, the sizzle of grilled meat, the gentle scent of barbecue sauce, the soft clinking of spoons against glasses as water was poured, all blended into a warm melody, filling the space that had once felt so bleak. Linda, with her floor supervisor name tag on her chest, moved confidently among the tables with a certainty she had never felt before. Her steps no longer trembled, and the smiles she offered were no longer forced. She paused by the table of an elderly couple, bowing slightly. "Is the food to your liking today?" The woman smiled, holding Linda's hand. "It's wonderful. Thank you for caring." Linda nodded gently, turning away, a small happiness blooming in her chest, a happiness that came from seeing her own worth reflected in grateful eyes. At the kitchen counter, the old man was still there every morning, adjusting the grill temperature, showing the young employee how to sear the outside while keeping the inside tender, how to add pepper, sauce, and how to present the dish neatly before serving. One afternoon, as he placed a steak on a plate, the young employee who had once mocked Linda looked at him. Hesitant, "I'm sorry for not understanding before." The old man placed a hand on the young man's shoulder, his voice warm and deep. "What matters is that you understand now." The young man nodded, eyes brightening, turning to pour water for a customer with a light smile, for the first time truly genuine. Other employees began to change, little by little. A young waitress who once avoided speaking to customers now dared to look them in the eye, smiling as she greeted them. A young kitchen helper quietly stood by the door, watching the old man grill, memorizing every movement before stepping in to help flip pancakes and add seasonings. An employee who once only sat scrolling on their phone now carefully wiped down tables, straightened napkins, and picked up a fallen spoon instead of ignoring it. They did not change because they were forced to. They changed because they realized the value of their work and how their work could change someone else's life. Customers began to return more frequently. A father brought his daughter back, the little girl running up to the kitchen counter, waving Grandpa. "Will you make pancakes for me today?" The old man smiled, nodding. "Of course, Princess." Her pure laughter made other customers laugh as well, the atmosphere in the diner becoming warmer than any heater could create. Social media posts continued to spread. I went back to an old diner and was surprised by the warm atmosphere. The owner grilled pancakes for my daughter, an unforgettable memory. Linda, the kind woman with the gentle smile, asked if I was happy with my meal. For the first time in a long time, I felt respected. People come back not just for the food, but for the feeling of being welcomed. That evening, after closing, the old man and Linda sat by the window table where the streetlights cast a soft glow. Linda held a cup of hot tea, her thin hands trembling slightly, her eyes looking out, her voice quiet. I used to think maybe I wasn't needed here anymore. The old man placed his hand over hers, his gaze steady. "You're not just needed. You are the soul of this place." Linda began to cry, for the first time in years, not out of exhaustion, not out of loneliness, but because she felt seen. In a world where silence has become the answer, the quiet ones still hold on to the values that are slowly disappearing. The old man looked around the diner, at the neatly arranged chairs, the spotless floor, the lingering scent of freshly baked goods, the warm light casting gentle shadows on the old wooden floor. In that moment, he knew his return had not been in vain. This place had once been his pride. Now, he had handed that pride to those who deserved it, so that they would continue to protect it. so that one day they would teach newcomers. Serving is not just bringing food to the table. Serving is giving a piece of your heart. That morning, as the soft sunlight pierced the fogged glass, the small diner was ready for a new day. The door chime rang as Linda stepped in first, adjusting the floor supervisor badge on her chest. Today, she wore a fresh apron, her hair neatly combed, her eyes still lined with age but shining with trust. The old man had been in the kitchen since early, checking the grill's temperature, organizing the spices, wiping down the counter with scarred hands that remained steady and precise. A young employee walked in, carrying a bag of pastries. "I bought these for everyone to have for breakfast, so we can have a good day at work." Another smiled, helping Linda line up the chairs neatly, wiping down water rings on the tables without needing to be asked. A diner is rebuilt not with promises, but with the smallest actions, every single day. Customers began to enter. A middle-aged man walked up to the old man, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You're the one who built this place, aren't you?" The old man smiled, nodding. "But I can't keep it alive alone." The man squeezed his shoulder gently, saying, "Thank you for coming back." Linda invited customers to sit, poured water, handed out menus, her smile genuine. An elderly woman walked up, holding Linda's hand. "It's been so long since I've been welcomed with a smile like that." Linda smiled, her eyes glistening. "You deserve to be welcomed like this." In the kitchen, the old man was grilling a steak for a young boy waiting, the boy's eager eyes peeking through the glass window of the kitchen, his tiny hand pressed against the foggy glass, a wide grin on his face. The old man placed the steak on a plate, stepped out, and bent down in front of the boy. "Enjoy your meal, champ." The boy burst into laughter, his eyes shining, turning to his mother. "Mum, I love this place." The sound of a child's laughter filled the diner, washing away the remnants of weariness hiding in the corners. A group of young customers came in, setting up their phones to record a vlog, saying, "We heard this place has changed. We're here to see for ourselves." Linda didn't panic, didn't fumble, but stepped forward with a calm smile. "Welcome, we're ready to serve you." They were served water. Their food arrived hot and carefully plated. Cries of "wow" filled the air as they took their first bites, their eyes brightening. It's true, just like they said, this place is back. Change doesn't need to be loud. Change shows in each smile, each hot meal, each look of respect. At the end of the day, when the customers had gone, the diner was cleaned, the scent of pastries and coffee still lingering in the air. The old man, Linda, and the staff sat together around a table, sharing leftover pastries, sipping hot tea. Linda looked around, her voice soft. "Today, I didn't feel like I was just in the way anymore." The young employee who had once mocked Linda looked up, saying, "I'm sorry, truly sorry for not understanding before." Linda smiled. "We've changed this place together." The old man looked around, his eyes moving across each face, his voice low and steady. "This place, its soul isn't kept alive by me, but by each of you." He paused, then continued, "And I promise, from today on, I will never abandon this place again." Outside the window, The streetlights flickered on, the silhouettes of people passing by reflected faintly. But inside, the diner was warm and peaceful. A diner isn't just a place that sells food. It's a place that preserves kindness, where people are respected, where those who have been forgotten are remembered. The old man stood, looking at Linda, at the staff laughing together, at children giggling next to their parents, at the elderly sipping tea, chatting softly. And he understood this place has been saved. That evening, as the city lights came alive, the small diner still glowed brightly, the warm yellow bulbs reflecting off the freshly cleaned wooden tables, creating soft circles of light. The old man stood outside the glass door, looking in. Linda was adjusting the chairs, carefully placing menus neatly on each table, her hands still trembling slightly, but her steps firmer than ever before. The young staff were cleaning together, laughing gently, sharing small stories from a day of serving. The soft giggle of a little girl rang out as she ran around a table, her parents watching her, smiling happily. An old man sipped his tea, his eyes calm and content, nodding at the old man through the glass. This isn't just a diner. This is a place where people find hope again. The old man stepped inside. Linda looked up and smiled. He nodded, glancing around before saying, "You all did well today." The diner fell silent for a moment, then smiles bloomed. A young employee whispered, "I've learned how to look at customers with gratitude." Another added, "I've realized that food isn't just something we sell. It's how we show respect." Linda stood next to the old man, her eyes shimmering. "Thank you for not giving up on this place." He placed a hand on her shoulder, smiling. "Thank you for keeping it alive until today." He turned to everyone, his voice warm yet strong. "Tomorrow, we will open like any other day. But remember, we don't just serve food, we serve people." He paused, his eyes filled with resolve. "If there comes a day when I am no longer here, I want you to remember the value of this place doesn't lie in its profits, but in how we treat our customers, our colleagues, and ourselves." Linda placed a hand on her chest, nodding, tears rolling down her cheeks while her mouth still curved into a smile. Outside, the streetlights shone into the diner, the dust particles floating in the air glinting like tiny stars. There was no longer a smell of dampness, no heavy silence, but a space filled with life. A young boy ran up to the old man, looking up with wide eyes. "Grandpa, will you make pancakes for me again tomorrow?" The old man bent down, ruffling the boy's hair. "Of course, little man. For children like him, this place must continue." The sound of a child's laughter rang out, pulling other laughter along with it. In that moment, the old man understood that every sacrifice, every drop of sweat, every scar on his hands had been worth it, because he had left behind a legacy, a place where people could come to find kindness again. He stood next to Linda, looking through the glass, seeing the reflection of his younger self, a young man in a grease-stained apron, eyes filled with passion. That image still lived within him, and now it had come alive again in the people around him. A diner can lose its soul when people forget why they started. but that soul can be found again by the quietest, most persistent, kindest among us. As night fell, the old man gently turned off the last lights, locking up the diner with Linda. He stood there for a moment, smiling, his eyes glistening under the streetlights. This place will continue, even if I'm not here every day, because there are people who will keep it alive in my place. He turned away, stepping into the city night, but in his heart there was a brilliant light, lighter than it had ever been. And if you've ever felt abandoned, ever felt overlooked, ever thought you didn't matter, remember, as long as you hold on to kindness, you are the one keeping the soul alive in the place where you stand. Have you ever met a Linda in your life? If you have, cherish them, and if you can, become a Linda for the place where you live and work.